Mm. All right, we're going to give it just a minute. It's taking a second to register on YouTube. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi, and welcome to Between the Pages, a self-publishing webinar. I'm Lindsay Maureen with Formax Printing Solutions, and we are excited to hear from some great speakers today about self-publishing and book printing. Joining us tonight, we have Linda Hansen, a self-published author. Linda has written 2 children's books, Otto the Otter and Little Lost Dog. In addition to writing her books, she also paints the illustrations inside. We are excited to have Linda here with us so that she can share her journey on becoming a self-published author. We also have Kristen Cronenberg with Formax Printing Solutions. She specializes in book printing and is happy to help you with any questions you may have in the printing process of your books. Just a little housekeeping at the end of our webinar today, we will come back on and go over any questions that you have. So be sure to put them in the chat so that we can get all of your questions answered either throughout the webinar or at the very end. All right, let's go ahead and jump right into it. I'm going to hand it over to Kristen and Linda for discussion. Take it away, ladies.
Okay. Thank you, Lindsay. Hi, everybody. As you can see, I'm Linda Hansen, and I'm going to start off doing the talking. I know Kristen is aware of that. What I'm going to talk about is my journey as an author. And it started off totally by accident. I started to paint 6 years ago in watercolor. I started painting in watercolor because I didn't know any better. I thought it was the easiest thing to learn because that's what children do in school. I found out I was sadly mistaken, but I stuck to it. I'm from St. Louis, but my husband and I moved here to Florida 9.5 years ago. Next to our home is a retention pond. And 2 days before closing on our home, we found out we own the retention pond. It has been amongst the many amazing things of living down here, probably the greatest. We've identified 36 species of birds and wading birds and ducks that we had never seen before. And 9 years ago, one day, I looked out the window, which I do 20 times a day, and I started screaming to my husband his name. So he comes running, "Are you okay?" He thought I'd gotten hurt. I go, "What's that?" And I'm looking out the window and I point, and he looks there and he looks at it and he goes, "Well, it's not a beaver." And he looks at it a little, he says, "We have an otter." I'd never seen an otter other than maybe at a zoo, and I didn't pay attention to it. So we started seeing our otter on a very regular basis. I started calling him Otto, very creative, don't tell anybody. Then there's the picture of my book. And so we started watching him, and this went on until 3 years ago. And then 3 years ago, one day I'm looking outside, and again I'm screaming, "Gary, Gary, Gary." And he comes running. "Now what happened?" I go, "Look." Well, the book is called Otto the Otter, A Big Surprise, because the surprise is Otto was not Otto. Otto is a girl. And how did we know? She came with 2 babies. I must have taken thousands of pictures, and I was painting some of them. And our neighbors started to realize that we had this very unique dynamic going on in the pond. So they were all coming home. On their way home from work, they would stop to see, we didn't know color then. It was just mom and the babies. And one of my neighbors was pressuring me, "You should write a book, you should write a book." Because every day people would ask questions about otters. I didn't know anything about otters. So I was doing research at night. I'd Google it. You can find anything on Google. And so the next day I'd say, "Oh, do you know this and do you know that?" So she was pressuring me to write a book. And this went on for a couple of weeks daily. And I would look at her, "You write the book. I don't know how to write a book." So finally, just to shut her up one day, I came into my house and I sat down at the computer and I very quickly wrote a book. And I had already painted maybe 4 pictures of the otters. So I printed it all out and I put it in a folder. And when she came that night after work, I went, "Here's your book, leave me alone." She said, "No, you need to print it." So I thought, okay, I'm going to go to Office Depot or Staples or somewhere and have 20 copies made and put a spiral thing around it and give it to a few people and say, "There's my book." Well, that's not what happened. A friend of mine who is a children's picture book author had just published her first book that year. So I called her and she came over and had lunch with us. And she told me about a program to learn how to self-publish. That was overwhelming. But I took that course. It was a 12-week course. There are now, in the last 3 years, there's quite a few different options to learn how to self-publish. But without it, I would have been absolutely lost. So I took this series of classes. It met 3 nights a week for 12 weeks. And I'm sitting there going, what on earth are you talking about? I didn't know what an ISBN number was. I knew about the Library of Congress, but I didn't know what an LCCN number was. And it didn't enter my mind that I was supposed to submit my book to get one. So there was all these little details that really aren't that little. But if you're not published before and you're hoping to be a first-time self-publisher, you need to do all of these things. The one thing I learned many of things, but one of the very first things was that you needed to have an editor. And I found this tremendous editor to work with. It so happens she only does children's picture books. So a friend of mine had written a middle grade chapter book. Nope, I don't do that. So different editors specialize in different things. Maybe you've written a novel, maybe you've written a romance novel, a sci-fi. There are people who specialize in those issues. And it was interesting because my friend said, expect the editor to send me lots of changes and she's going to tell you what to rewrite. And well, she didn't. She changed like maybe 5 to 10 of my words and restructured, didn't change, but just restructured a couple of my sentences. And that was it. Now, I've since heard her speak and she's done webinars for people. And one of the things I've heard her talk about is that oftentimes an author becomes enamored of their words and they push back the editor. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want this. I don't want that. Well, the point is the editor knows what they're doing. So you have to have faith in your editor and allow them to push you and drag you into other places. My second book, this Little Lost Dog book, I used the same editor, and she gave me an edit, and I questioned her. I said, I understand what you're saying, but this is why I wrote it that way. And I gave her a very specific statement. She wrote me back. She said, fine. And that was the end of that edit. But an editor is really, really important. So if you don't have an editor, go and find one. Then there's illustrations. I'm not unusual, but it's not common for the author to also do their own illustrations. And today, if you go into the library or if you go into Barnes & Noble, if you have one near you, and look at the children's book division, which is what I'm interested in, the majority of the illustrations are computer generated. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't mean to sound negative, but when you look at one of my 2 books, they look very different. They look different on the shelves. I've heard parents, grandparents, the children themselves talk about my paintings. It's intrigued me in the book about the otter. I've watched children looking at it and they pet the pictures. And I think, it's paper. What are you petting? but I guess they think that they can feel the fur of the otter. I don't know. It fascinates me. So if you're writing a book that's going to need illustrations, you're going to need an illustrator. There's many places to find them. I don't. There's a website, and I have to tell you, I have never used it. I don't even know how you pronounce it. It's Fivver. Fiverr. Don't ask me. But they have almost anything that you want, you can find there, whether it's an illustrator, whether it's an editor. And what I will tell you is interview and speak with more than one illustrator. Don't just find one and go with them. Have them send you examples of their work. You may not like it when you see it, regardless of what they say they do. And this is critical. Do not give the illustrator ownership of the pictures. It's your book, it's your pictures. You're paying them for it. And illustrators are not cheap. I got very lucky and I saved a lot of money because I do my own illustrations. They probably, and I don't know for sure, but I've been told they can be anywhere from $2,500 up to $5,000 to pay for an illustrator, depending what kind of book you're having and how much you need. So you need an editor, you need an illustrator, you need to get your ISBN numbers, you need to get your LCN number, and then there's something called the font. I Googled that. I was curious because, again, being a children's picture book, there are fonts that they tend to recommend because they're easier for a child to read. Also, the size of them. You don't want to use a 12-point font. Kids can't read that easily. And plus, there's not a lot of words. Again, depending on the kind of book you're doing, and you can Google this information. A children's picture book is usually 650 to 700 words. Thank heavens. I talk a lot, but I don't write a lot. So now you've written your book, you've had it edited, you've had it illustrated. Now comes the next part. You need a graphic designer. And I see a lot of people who are doing self-publishing who are doing their own graphic design. I was fortunate that I had somebody that I consider to be a brilliant graphic designer. I think that she did a beautiful, beautiful job with my books. And first she sent me a draft and I wrote her back and I said, could you change this, this, and this? And then she sent me a second draft. And then I said, well, I'd really like to see this and this. And so then we did a Zoom and she spent an hour and a half with me on the Zoom. And we literally went page by page. And I said, I love that. Could you do this on that? And she fixed every single thing I asked about. And she also, which a good graphic designer will do for you, she did all the formatting. Trust me, I don't understand the formatting. And I see Kristen laughing, but it's true. And she formatted my soft cover for KDP. She formatted the book for Amazon, and she formatted it for Kristen. So Kristen got an email from her, and boom, I was ready to go. And so all of that needs to be done to make it really happen.
We have a question, Linda, if you want me to hop in and ask it. We have Karen has asked, does this mean you shouldn't allow the illustrator to have their own copyright on the illustrations on the copyright page? So can you go into that a little bit more?
Well, I've never had that question asked quite that way. Her name is on my page, but wait a minute, I'm going to look. I don't think she's got a copyright. I'm the only one that has a copyright, I believe, but I'm looking because I've never had that. It just says graphic design by, but I hold the copyright. Because how she can, my thought would be, how would she hold the copyright if it's my book and I have it copyrighted? That's a good question, Karen. I hope I answered you in a way that you're comfortable with. But her name is in there. It says graphic design by. Are we okay? Okay. Um, and then last but not least, well, no, we'll do printing for the very last. My book was in the process of being printed by Formax, my first one. And I had gone to this market that I knew that there were usually authors at. And there was this woman who was a children's picture book author. She's already had 10, 15 books, and she had a huge booth with it was overwhelming to me. And I waited till there was nobody there, and I approached her and I introduced myself and, said to her what I was doing. And she said, okay. And then she looked at me. She said, how are you going to market your book? And I very proudly said, oh, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And she looked at me and she said, no, I asked you, how are you going to market your book? So I sort of took a deep breath thinking, what does she mean? So instead of doing ABC, I did DEF. Now, I'm not a shy person. I'm a big personality, as you may have already figured out. But this woman looked at me and she said, no, I asked you how you're going to market the book. And I could just feel myself getting my stomach was all in knots, and my instinct was to smart off at her. And so I took a deep breath and I thought about it and I said, well, I'm going to do JKL. And then she looked at me, she said, now you answered my question. Don't ask me what I said. I don't remember. It was 2.5 years ago. But what she did tell me was that there's a book that was published quite some time ago. I think you can still find it on Amazon, perhaps. But it was about marketing your book. And in the very front of the book, one of the first things it says is, if you haven't figured out how you're going to market your book, don't write the book. And marketing is different than selling. Selling is when I go to markets and sell my book. Selling is really when I've managed to get Barnes & Noble, which is hard to do, and I'm in 6 stores. That's getting my book sold. But marketing it and thinking of a real plan of who you're going to reach out to and how you're going to do it is a really key part. So you need to be spending some time thinking about that. But none of that means anything until you do the printing. And honestly, because I believe in getting a lot of quotes, which I did from the editors and I did from other processes, is I contacted several printers, and I was so fortunate that I stayed and went with Formax. Formax, if you don't know, you have to learn a whole lot. I mean, I've learned so much that I can't believe what I've learned. Amazon, and I'm not going to pick on Amazon, but the books that when you buy a book from Amazon, they're done what they call POD, which stands for print on demand, and they're digital. Kristen might want to correct me, but isn't digital like what we do at home with our own printers?
Yeah, it's a different quality. It's normally not the preferred quality, but it's definitely easier for print on demand.
Yeah, and the ink stays on top of the paper. And Formax doesn't do digital. They do what's called offset printing. So the ink actually gets into the paper. And when I got my books from them, and they're gorgeous. That's all I got to tell you is they're just gorgeous. And I had lunch one day with a friend of ours who, when we sat down, had my book on the table. And I thought, she's a friend of mine, and I don't remember selling her the book. I didn't autograph it for her. And we order our lunch, and my husband was with me. And while we're waiting for it, she said, would you autograph my book before lunch comes? And I said, of course, I'd be thrilled. So she handed me my book. And the minute I opened it, I went, oh, I didn't say that, but I thought it. My husband hopped up from the table and he left. I know where he's going. Let me tell you, this is going to be your first book or you already have books, always have books in the trunk of your car. Always, because you can always sell them. So he went out to the car. I knew what he was doing. And he comes back carrying my beautiful book. He hands it to her, and she opens it. And the minute she opened it, she goes, "Well, I want this book. Can I pay you for it?" I said, "Well, you already bought that book." She says, "I'm going to give that book away. I want this book." Now, what were the things I learned? Aside from the fact that when you get a book from Amazon, the cover weight isn't as nice and the interior paper isn't as nice, there's other issues. I wanted end pages on my book, being that it's a children's picture book. Some people just want a colored page. Even for a novel, they want blue or orange or whatever color they want. When they're doing POD, they don't do end pages. All they do is white. They also glue their books. My book, and it's hard for you to see it. Can I get it here? No. Which way do I need to go? My book is what they call, is it side stitch?
Side sewn.
Yeah, side sewn. Okay. It's sewn together. So the pages aren't ever going to fall out. They're not glued. And all I can tell you is that there is a vast, vast difference. And Formex, their job is just beautiful. I've now had them do my second book. And I don't know that there's going to be a third book, but if there is, you can be sure that they're going to be doing my third book. It's just the best. And there really is a difference.
And I do agree. I think it was really great that we were able to go back and forth and go over all the specs that you need, what your page count is, what the size of your book is. And we were able to communicate that one-on-one with each other so that you could get the final product that you want and you love in your hand.
Right. And also, we didn't talk about the little thing called the number, how many books you print. When I first spoke to Kristen, I said, "Well, price me 200 books." So she sent me the price, and I look at it, and I took a huge gulp. There was no way I could pay for that and sell the book at $17.99 and have any profit left. So I said, "Okay." So I said, "Well, could you do me 300 to 500?" Which she did. Formex is the best to work with. They'll just hold your hand. So I get that price, and it's better, not great. And Kristen said, "If you could order 1,000 books, I think you would be happy." I took a huge gulp. I had her price me out 1,000 books, and she's right. So you've got to have the money to pay for it. That's got to come up front. And I'll touch on that. Fortunately, I had the money, so I paid her the money. So I've already had that expenditure, but now when I sell books, it's covering the cost. Actually, I've paid for the first 1,000 books. I've now had a second 1,000 printed, but the first 1,000 I did make back that, and I was in the black. I wasn't even in the red. But those things are really, really important, because in the long run, depending, I'm not young. Don't be fooled by my personality. What I tell people is I'm OLD. And I'm not looking, I'm not 30 and I'm not 40, and I'm not looking to make this be a career. It's not my hobby. It's much more than that. But I don't expect to make my living selling my books. But you're going to need money to prepay with an offset printer like Formex, and I highly, highly recommend them. So there's a program, and you can find out about it on YouTube. You can Google it. There's webinars on it called Kickstarter. And Kickstarter is a way for you to go to people. It can be family, it can be friends, it could be people you don't know that you're asking them for money. And you create a goal. You need $10,000 to make your book happen. So you have a Kickstarter goal of 10,000. And a lot of people I know, and I've never had to do a Kickstarter, so I don't know anything about it, or very little, I should say. But a lot of times they'll say, for donating to my Kick, because it's a donation, for donating to my Kickstarter. When my book is printed, you will get a copy. So depending how many you have, you might be getting rid of 20, 50 copies, 100 copies right away. But so if you're saying, gee, I don't have that kind of money to invest in myself, you're going to want to do a Kickstarter.
All right, we have a couple of more questions in the chat. So the first one is, Jenny says, I'd love to know what sort of minimums you guys have for print runs. Example, full color, 32-page picture book, perfect bound.
So on the children's books, the minimum we can do on a hardcover book would be a quantity of 25. On the soft covers, it'd be a quantity of 50. And just keep in mind when doing that, as a rule of thumb, your per piece price is going to be higher on the lower quantities, and it's going to be lower on the higher quantities. So you may want to explore also, if it's 25, 50, and 100, just to see how your price drops with the higher quantity.
All right, and then we have one other one. What paperweight did you use, Linda?
Kristen, answer that.
You did a matte laminated cover, and then we did 100-pound text for your interior pages, which is my recommendation for children's books. It's a little bit thicker for an interior stock, but kids can be so tough on books that just a little bit thicker goes a long way.
Yeah, and it makes a big difference. I mean, go into Barnes and Noble and handle their books, and you'll go, I understand, because they're not using books from an offset printer. And it's a huge difference. And these days, and I assume most of you know this, but the big thing now, especially if you're doing a children's picture book, is when girls are having their baby showers, oftentimes they're asking to get books for their baby shower gift. And onesies, how many onesies do you need? 6 months later, 3 months later, their onesie is gone. Where a book, I've had moms tell me at markets, they're reading to their babies while they're nursing. And certainly the baby doesn't even understand what's being said to them, but it's that voice pattern and that intimacy that they're growing. And then by the time the child's 1 or 2, they're already becoming a reader. So, and then you figure children's picture book, they can read it to 8 or 10. Look at all the years they've gotten and joy they've gotten from it.
Exactly. There's a follow-up question. Is that glossy 100-pound, Kristen?
I believe off the top of my head, we did matte instead. So 100-pound matte text, which is coated still. It has like a slight sheen to it, but it's not like a high gloss, like a gloss text would be.
Yeah, I don't know that you can't really see that, because there's some shine to it, but it's a matte look, as opposed to if you really think about what a gloss cover looks like.
And then another one, where are your books printed?
So we are located in St. Louis, Missouri. The plants are located across the country. Depending on what your specs are of your project, will then determines exactly which location.
I think that's all the questions so far. So if you guys want to continue or have anything else you want to share, go right ahead.
I think I covered all of my topics that I wanted to share. I think that I talk fast, so.
I have a question for you, Linda. What advice would you give authors?
Oh, besides thinking about marketing?
Yes.
That's a hard question. I think it depends what kind of book they're writing. Like children's picture books, that genre has a very narrow genre. It's not a real big genre. the bigger thing is middle grade books. Science fiction is real big. Romance novels right now are real big. So are mysteries. So depending upon the style of writer you are, I couldn't write those. If you said to me, Linda, I will pay you, if you said I'll pay you $100,000 to write a book like that, I'd go, better find somebody else. I don't know how. So I think it's a matter of what your expectations are as an author, and also what your abilities are. And mine, and as you heard me say, mine came out as an accident. I mean, I never, a lot of times when I've been sitting in my Zoom classes that I was taking, or even on Facebook groups, and people will say that they've been writing since they were 8 or 9 years old, or they've wanted to be a writer since they were 12. And I'm thinking, I never thought about wanting to be a writer. So everybody's place is different, and mine's just a crazy story.
I had a question, Linda. I know you touched a little bit on marketing strategies and how important that was for you at the beginning, and that person asking you that question. What are some of the best strategies for marketing yourself as an author or marketing your book? What advice would you give to new authors?
Number one, it depends the genre. Then number two, it depends what it's about. The fact that my book is about an otter, and it meets STEAM, which is for schools. Like if you just write a little piece of fluffy story, they don't want it. When I go to a school and do school visits, I don't know if I talked about that. I do school visits, which are just great, and they're also a good place to sell your books. I've done events at libraries that I've been asked to come to. And but because my book is a factual book, I started reaching out to nature preserves. And that's hard to do because a lot of them, don't even have a gift shop. Then if they do, having them, I've done okay in my immediate area. Getting to other states has proven to be very difficult for me. So that all needs to be thought out. And I never thought of it before. So I worked on it real hard. To me, a zoo is a natural. A lot of places who have gift shops have changed, and there's no longer a buyer at those individual gift shops. They're using third-party vendors. And I have yet to be able to get to a third-party vendor, which is very frustrating to me. But that's part of knowing where you're going to go and how you're going to do it. And 2 weeks ago, I started about 2 months ago. I had what I thought was a marketing brainstorm, and I contacted a very major car dealer who does things with dogs. So I went into the local dealers. They gave me some emails and some phone numbers, and you have to be willing to knock on a lot of doors. That's the other thing about marketing. You have to be willing to knock on doors, and they don't always open. And if they do, they might tell you no. No doesn't mean don't ever knock on my door again. It means right now it's not a good fit. So wait a month, wait 2 months, wait 3 months, and go back to them again and say, hey, we spoke before. I just wanted to see. Sometimes they tell you yes the second time around. So I was knocking on this car dealer, and I finally got to a dealer that has 3 or 4 maybe they have 5 dealerships, whatever, in a couple of different states. And I said to them, moms and dads come to pick up the car in service, and they often have a child with them, and the kid's running around and they're bored, and but if you had my book, it would give them something to read. I said, or even in the dealer when they come at night to shop for a car, and they've got the kids with them and they're running around like crazy. That's a marketing idea. And I said, so the first she's not small, but if they have 6 dealerships, she bought one of a book, 2 for each dealer, for each shop. So they had it in the service bay and in the showroom. And so then I talked to her. I said, how do I get corporate? She said, well, I can't direct you, but here's an email. Thank you. So that took several times of trying to communicate. And it finally got down 2 weeks ago. I mailed them a copy of my book. And I told them what I was hoping. If they were to bite on this, it could be a big order. And then I would be going, Kristen, I need, and at that point, if I could sell 1,000 books, 2,000 books, I don't know, I wouldn't need to have as much profit as I want when I sell them on my own. So I might drastically cut my margin just to $1 or $2, because if it's going to be one time, hello, I'd be a happy camper. And it would offer them the book at a good price. So marketing is really thinking about all those issues. And you need to be prepared if you're going to try to get into gift shops or into small, there's some indie bookstores are coming back in fashion. But they're going to want 40% off your list. So you better be thinking about what you're going to be able to list your book for, that you can give away 40% of it. I've been lucky at a couple of places. They've taken it for 30%, but usually it's 40%. I had somebody want 50%, and I said, I can't do it. I'd be in the red. Not by a lot, but it was like $1 a book to lose money. Well, why would I do that? So I told them no. But marketing is, you have to think about how you're going to market your book, where you're going to go, who would want your book. And maybe your book would be good for, if it's a scholastic kind of, I don't mean scholastic printing, that's a whole nother story. But if it's a book that is educational, you might be able to pitch it to a college and have them buy a whole lot, and then that can go viral. So it depends what your book is.
Thank you. We kind of have a follow-up question on that. It's Linda, do you sell books from your website, and how easy is that? How does that work? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Websites are very interesting. If you're going to be a serious author, you have to have one. A lot of people are creating their own. I've seen some that look nice. I paid to have my website created. And the same as I think my book is gorgeous from Formax, I think my website is special. And I've looked at maybe 10, 15 authors who have websites. I've seen a couple that I really liked, and the others are just so plain and simple and generic. But my books, both of them are available, as are my school visits. So a teacher can go and look at my website and ask for me to come teach at a school. I have a variety of things. I have teacher resources on my website. But the book, there is a shopping area. Both books are there. They can buy hardcover. They can buy softcover. I have to charge for the shipping. So there's an extra charge for shipping. And I'll get an email saying you've had a book ordered by so-and-so. They want it autographed to so-and-so, because I have room for all of that, in the website. And I don't sell a ton of them. I wish I sold more, but I am selling. I also am using Instagram, and the numbers for self-published authors are not huge. But then again, I know other self-published authors that they've sold 20,000 books. I don't know how they do it, and some of them do really, really well at schools, and I'm still struggling with that.
All right, we have another one. What is your next book going to be about? And you might not know the answer to that one yet, but maybe that'll give you some inspiration.
No, so both these books, if you were to read both of them, the underlying subject sort of both books is both books talk about the people in the gray house. Now, unless I've told you this or you know it for a fact, people don't realize my husband and I are the people in the gray house, because I already told you that the otter story we witnessed. And the little dog story, we had a neighbor who found the dog on our street. And so even that story is our story about what we did with this little lost dog. So everybody, we've been having at our retention pond an uninvited guest. And I've posted pictures of the uninvited guest, a few of them on Facebook. And I'll get 10, 20, 30 comments saying, that's got to be the new book. I'm not sure, but it might be called Allie the Shy Gator.
Oh.
I'm only thinking about it. I haven't committed. It takes 16 of my paintings per book, and I don't paint fast, so it's usually about a week a picture. So I'm looking at 4 months just to paint. And so by the time I do everything else, it pretty much, nobody's asked this question, from start to finish to book in my hand is about 9 months. You know, between the writing and the editing and my painting and then the graphic designer and then Formax, 6 to 9 months. So I don't know. And as I said, I'm OLD.
Well, I think these next ones are kind of for Kristen. So, Kristen, what types of books do you guys specialize in printing? And then a follow-up with that would be, what seems to be the most popular binding method, or any information you can give us about children's books specifically?
I mean, we specialize in just books in general. So any type of binding style, whether that's perfect binding, spiral binding, saddle stitch, or a hardcover. Typically for the children's books, though, perfect binding for the soft covers is by far the most popular. And then like a standard hardcover book is the most popular too. There are other options, but it's just not as common, but it's definitely doable.
Awesome. And then another question was, how do you handle custom orders or special printing requests? Is that something that Formax can handle? And can you give some more information on that?
Yeah, so the everything we do is 100% custom. So Linda's project versus someone else's project could have completely different specs. And I think that's what we do great in, is that we will take your custom project and we'll work with you one-on-one so that we can get it to whatever you want, and so that you have a product in your hand that you love. And you know, it might take a few requotes, it might take a few weeks to figure out what that is, but you can at least pick up the phone, give us a call, and we'll be able to answer and walk you through that.
And let me tell you, Kristen is great. You know, she never made me feel that I had too many questions, and I have a lot of questions. She was responsive to my emails. She was responsive to my phone calls. There were times that we would do things on emails, and then she'd say, but we need to talk. Fine. The service that I receive from Kristen and Formax is way up here.
Thank you, Linda.
We're happy to hear that. We hope you get to write in your next book about the alligator, and we can't wait to read that one as well. I think you should do it. The first two were a hit. You got one more in you.
We'll see. We'll see. I'm not saying no, but I'm not saying yes.
Well, is there anything else that Kristen or Linda, you guys want to share? I don't think we have any more questions right now in the comments. Any final last thoughts?
I think I covered everything that I wanted to talk about. Because there's just, you know, there's so much online now, and you know, even YouTubing, it's nonstop. Oh, I will say, the ISBN number, that company that I said I wouldn't talk about, it starts with an A. They're very happy to provide you your ISBN number. Do not do that, because then that gives them ownership. You want to get your own ISBN number. And there's a company called I think it's Bowker, Bowker. Is that it, Kristen? I see you
I
nodding.
believe so.
I think that's what it's called. You can Google them, you'll find them. And they sell lots of 5 ISBN numbers or 10 ISBN numbers, because you're going to need one if you do an ebook, you need one if you do a paperback book, you need one if you do your hardcover. So I think I bought a bundle of 10, and it was not that expensive compared to what you spend for other things. And so I get to rebuy it because I had enough to do both books. And then the Otto book, I had translated into Spanish. So it needed its own ISBN number for the Spanish version. So there's money all the time that is, most of it's trickle out, but just make sure, don't give ownership of your book to anybody else. It's yours.
That's such great advice, especially for new authors, people that are looking to self-publish, or just maybe coming up with an idea. And I think both of you had a lot of helpful advice. I want to thank both of you for joining us tonight and for all the insightful information that you provided us. We definitely appreciate it. And I know our listeners have gained some information as well. And then we want to thank our listeners and our guests for joining us as well. We would love for you to visit our website, formaxprinting.com. We have a lot of information there, lots of questions that can be answered, and just general printing information. And of course, Kristen would be happy to talk with you, go over any questions that you may have, and kind of walk you through that printing journey as she has done with Linda. And we just hope that you found this information informative and engaging. And we would love for you to follow us on social media so that you can hear about our upcoming webinars. You can just look up Formax Printing, and we will keep everything posted on there. So thank you all for joining us, and we hope you have a great evening.
And I thank all of you. I don't know who is here listening to us, but thank you for being here. And thank you for the opportunity, Lindsay and Kristen.
Thanks, Linda.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.